Think about the last time you bought some shampoo or a face cream. You use the product, and then what happens to the box, the bottle? For most of us, it's out of sight, out of mind. But for businesses, that simple question is turning into a massive headache, making that packaging less of an asset and more of a serious liability. For the longest time, packaging was a no-brainer. It was an asset, right? It protected the product, it looked great on the shelf, it was your brand's little billboard. But things are changing, and they're changing fast. So we have to ask the big question right up front. In the world we live in today, is your packaging really an asset, or is it slowly becoming a major liability? And the reason that answer is changing? Well, it's because of this powerful new wave of regulations called Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR for short. This is a total game changer because it takes the responsibility for what happens to a product at the end of its life and puts it right back on the shoulders of the company that made it. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll start with what I'm calling the packaging predicament. Then we'll look at a standard that can help companies navigate this. After that, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of managing the packaging lifecycle, see how to turn this risk into a reward, and finally, we'll talk about thinking beyond the box.
All right, first up, the packaging predicament. This whole thing is a really complex journey that starts way back on the factory floor and, believe it or not, ends long, long after you've finished with the product.
What's so interesting here is how all these different pressures just stack on top of each other. I mean, packaging is already a big cost, right? But then its weight also drives up your shipping costs. At the exact same time, you've got consumers and big retailers demanding less waste. And then, bam. Layered on top of all that, you have these new regulations and EPR schemes which can hit a company's bottom line with brand new fees and penalties. It's a perfect storm.
So, with all that pressure coming from every direction, how on earth is a company supposed to figure this out? Well, that brings us right to our next section, finding a standard for sustainability. For a lot of companies, the answer is a framework like the SASB standards. Now, SASB, that stands for the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, is designed to do one thing and do it really, really well. It connects sustainability issues like packaging directly to a company's financial performance. It's all about treating these things not just as nice-to-haves, but as real business risks and opportunities.
And let's be clear, this isn't some one-size-fits-all approach. The SASB standards are broken down into 77 different playbooks, each one tailored to a specific industry, like household and personal products. And here's the key. They help companies report on the stuff that could actually impact their bottom line, things that affect cash flow or access to capital. It's about giving investors a super clear picture of the risks involved.
So what does this actually look like in practice? Now we're getting to the real heart of it. Managing the packaging life cycle by zeroing in on the very specific metrics that truly matter. So the SASB standard for this industry, you can see the code there, CGHP410A, it lays out exactly what companies should be tracking. It's really broken into two key parts. First, you have the hard data, the quantitative stuff. What's the total weight of all your packaging? What chunk of that comes from recycled or renewable sources? And, so important, what percentage can actually be recycled, reused, or composted? Then the second part is more of a story, a discussion of the strategies you have in place to actually get better at all this.
Okay, let's zoom in on that first metric, the numbers, because this is where the kind of abstract idea of sustainability gets real and becomes hard data you can actually work with.
So first up, let's look at the sourcing side of things. Basically, what's your packaging made of? A company needs to know this breakdown cold. How much is from recycled stuff? How much from renewable materials like plant-based plastics? And how much is still brand new non-renewable material? That last number, that's a huge indicator of how exposed a company is to things like resource shortages and rising prices.
And then you've got the other side of the coin, the end of the journey. This is where those EPR regulations we talked about can really bite. What percentage of your packaging is actually designed to be recycled in the systems we have today? How much is compostable? Or even better, reusable? And that last slice, the piece that's just destined for the landfill, well, that represents a direct financial and reputational risk for the brand.
Okay, so tracking all these numbers is one thing, but what's the real payoff here? This is where we get to the business case, and it's all about flipping this potential risk into a very real reward. The choice really couldn't be clearer. On one hand, you can ignore this stuff, but that means facing higher shipping costs, getting hit with fines from EPR schemes, and damaging your brand's reputation. But on the other hand, If you manage this stuff strategically, you can actually reduce costs, avoid those fines, and build a stronger brand that customers love and trust.
So let's pull all this together and really look ahead, because this is about so much more than just ticking a compliance box. It's about building a smarter, more resilient business for the future. There's a key takeaway from the research that just says it all, really. This isn't just about reducing waste for the sake of it. Managing your packaging effectively is a competitive advantage. It puts companies in a better position to win over modern consumers and, crucially, to stay ahead of the regulations that are definitely coming. It's all about being proactive instead of reactive. So the big takeaway here is that the humble box, the simple bottle, it's not so simple anymore. It's become a core strategic issue. And that brings us to the one central question that every single personal care brand really needs to be asking itself. So I'll just leave you with this thought. Is your packaging strategy ready for the future?